I've been prompted to do a faith-based album for over 10 years. And in my stubborn, willful way, I was like, no, I don't want to. And part of it was because of my mentality about the CCM music industry as a whole and maybe not being receptive to rock music. I mean, that very much was staring me in the face when I was younger. I was sitting in church one Sunday, and I was following a series. The pastor was teaching on a series about Moses. And so I think we were probably about 3 or 4 weekends into that series. And from the beginning of the series, I started just feeling kind of this low rumbling of, oh my gosh, just imagining and envisioning a woman in that position, what she would face as in place of Moses. And then it just dawned on me that, oh my gosh, I look at the last 15, 20 years of my life and I was in the wilderness, every which way you can name. And I was all of a sudden inspired to write a book, but from a woman's perspective in the wilderness. And so I started kind of creating an outline for that and just really, churning it and just thinking about it. And the thought popped up into my head, well, you're also a singer. You also write songs. Instead of writing a book, write this album. And then I'm like, tricky, because that was the faith-based album that I was prompted to do years before this revelation. Irreverent is that. It is that and more.
Irreverent for his presence. What you say, you're going the wrong way. Irreverent in all the...
I have to say that within the CCM realm, this definitely is my first faith-based album. However, I actually was in 2 secular rock bands when I was younger and also recorded albums then. Right around when I started, I think it was the release of my second single, and we were smack in the middle of COVID-19. And, all music industry insiders would say it was a horrible time for musicians to be releasing music. They're not wrong. That there is something to be said about that. But, my faith and my gut was just keep releasing music, because I also thought the other side of that coin is that people were at home, people were seeking either solace or seeking to lose their minds and just rock out to something really good. And I felt led to continue to release music. And again, at the time, my third single actually was about to be released. It was a ballad, and it was called Symphony.
Listen to the symphony. In perfect time.
It evokes a very peaceful feeling. And I thought, no, my gut feeling in my heart, I was like, no way. Could be a song that somebody needs, that somebody wants to hear, that someone is, desiring to hear in the throes of the whole pandemic. And so I think generally everybody on my team, the consensus was, I think this is a great time for indie artists to keep releasing music. And if you're good with it, Jodi, then let's full steam ahead. So the message behind Irreverent, I could see, was confusing for some, especially some of the journalists, because irreverent, at first look at that word, it just sounds like pure rebellion. And it's like a faith-based or a Christian rock artist coming out with an album called Irreverent. I could see where some more of the conservative listeners were like, oh, I'm not listening to that music. That must be, bad music. So, Irreverent is intended to represent a rebellious spirit against the world in Christ's name for his kingdom. Being willing to offend. Obviously, you don't purposely ever want to, offend anybody, but you have to be willing to offend for the gospel. You have to, we give so much attention and creed to clothing brands and cars we drive and social media and possessions. I mean, people go crazy over names and brands and materialistic things. And I wonder most of the time, why can't you go after music that way? Why can't you go after the gospel that way? Get it out to the world, be irreverent, be rebellious, create a rebellion, get the message out there. And so Irreverent is intended, it's just the spirit in which it was written, the album was written, and it's that liberating freedom and rebellion against the world in the name of Christ. I think the response to Irreverent has been amazing. I think nationally and internationally. At first, the guitar-driven melodic rock was the draw, the initial draw. And then once people started getting into the lyrics and reading about it, or maybe I'd talk about it on social media, I think that made people, dig a little bit deeper. And I also think people need to just sit with music a little bit and think about how it makes them feel, why it makes them feel, and maybe they're going through something personally and they happen to explore the lyrics, and then bam, it applies to them. A lot of people, they're either really into lyrics or they're not, and they just kind of listen to the music. And I think once people started really getting into the lyrics, because I'm a very lyrics-driven person, these songs are very lyrically driven, and so they're really important. They're just as important as the composition to the song. So everyone go listen to the lyric, go read the lyrics. That's the intent. I write them out of truth, out of life experience, and I'm very direct and very vulnerable in my lyrics, and I want people to get, obviously the lyrics are going to mean something different to everybody, but the gist of the song, there's always a message behind every song I write, and I want people to understand that, whether or not they can relate to it, from top to bottom, but somehow I want them to glean the truth in the song itself.
The place of your blame feels like feeding you freedom. What is your truth? What is your truth?
And it's still reaching the far corners of the world. I love Brazil. Brazil has been super open to the album, and I have lots of listeners that I communicate with on a weekly basis. And Mexico, now the Philippines, and Emmanuel Radio in Albania, and Effect Radio in Idaho Falls. I mean, it's been just a tremendous response, whether it's here in our United States or abroad. I'm super grateful and feel super blessed for the reception of it. Music is the one thing that I'm most impassioned about. I grew up in musical theater, and I've done some other things in the entertainment industry, but music is it's a gift from God. I mean, I feel like that was just a blessing that I received at a very young age, and just a passion and a love for music. And what inspires me most about music is just the influence that music has. It can comfort you. It can make you feel enthusiastic, inspired. It can energize you to get all jacked up before a workout. I mean, music is it's the one thing. It's the only thing of its type that does what it does, in addition to uniting the entire world, because you don't have to necessarily know a language to appreciate a song. You could hear a beautiful song in a foreign language, and somehow it's moving and it touches you, or you rock out to something that you hear. I was just rocking out to a Brazilian rock band just yesterday. So being part of that for people, being able to create that gift for people and see how it influences and affects people is just, it's the biggest inspiration for me. That is why I do it. That is why I return to it day in and day out.
Find all you seek. Best story told. Any presence good present in. Fearless. Take hold. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So in the CCM realm, Christian rock definitely has a particular stigma attached to it. Through the years, through the decades, century, we started with hymns, gospel songs, and then hymns and that kind of thing. And that's very steeped in tradition. And I feel like it's been hard to some degree to break from that tradition in terms of worship music, in terms of faith-based music. And so to me, when I think of faith-based music, I think of it in terms of food because I love food. You have this wicked sweet tooth. I have a wicked sweet tooth, but I also love salty and savory. And so when I think of the different genres of music, it just depends on what are you in the mood for that day. They all have a positive message. They all have the message of Christ in it. They just sound different. It's still worship music, no matter if it's an amazing and a well-arranged and emotive ballad, or one of my rock songs. It's still proclaiming and it's still sending the same message. And I want people to kind of just really, really, truly start to let go of what they feel worship music or Christian music should sound like, or what it should feel like. That if it has rip-roaring drums and a killer bass line and just amazing guitar riffs, that it can't be, it can't be Jesus music, it can't be God music. Yes, it can. We can wear ripped jeans to church and a leather jacket and still be on fire for God. And in terms of the secular world, well, yeah, most people would say that rock has kind of fallen away because, we had a surge of hip hop and R&B and pop, which is amazing. A lot of great music has come out of it and still being produced. And rock really probably has taken a back seat to some degree since the 80s and the 90s. So I feel like it's always kind of been making a comeback. For those of us who live and breathe rock and roll, I feel like, it hasn't gone away for us. But we also still go back and listen to retro songs. We listen to the 80s and the 90s and some of the 70s and even the 60s rock and roll because look at some of the amazing artists that were churned out of those eras. And so, it still exists, and rock is not dead. Guitar is not dead. And I'm here to substantiate that claim.
For all your fighters out there! Ooh.
A lot of music today is very, very overproduced. Rock and roll is known for its huge sound that can be made from so little. You can rock out a fantastic song on stage with a 4-member band, and it can sound huge. It can sound amazing, and I think that people they're missing that. Being at, if you've ever been, a live rock show, like a full-blown rock and roll show. The energy from it, and it's just incredible. I mean, it's such a high, and it's just such an amazing, emotional and inspirational experience. And it's just liberating, and it's a little crazy, and it just lets everybody kind of just get out of their skin and get out of their minds and just live it, just live the energy. My faith has been tested, I don't know how many times, and I mean, God has been so faithful every single time.
And I am weightless in your love. My past is dead and gone.
The fact that I am an emerging artist in the CCM realm, no one's ever heard of me. I've never done a faith-based album, yet I'm releasing my debut album smack in the middle of this pandemic. And my songs are being streamed like crazy. I'm picking up listeners on all my social media channels. The response and love from the journalists, I am so grateful that they've covered and they've done features and that kind of thing. I mean, that's crazy. That's unheard of. Like, I still am in disbelief of the reception, and that's a God thing. In reality, this just shouldn't have, up to this point, have gone as well as it has. I just feel like it's an incredible blessing, and it just showed me all over again what I'm capable of having a Christ-centered life and, dedicating my life to that. There isn't anything. There are no impossibilities. You have to work hard at it. You have to have faith, and you have to trust in God. I mean, that's just the way it is. What's coming up? Well, I'm still trying to get creative and think outside the box, really think with no box, and try to figure out how to tour, what the possibilities are in terms of touring, getting out there to play.
And reach down deep, with him you will survive. So get up, stand up and rise, and lift your hands up to the sky. So get up, stand up and rise. Get up, stand up and rise.
I know a lot of people are doing drive-in shows and that kind of thing, and that's tough to pull off, but I'm kind of possibly thinking of doing a radio tour because that doesn't require a ton of people in the room. You've got maybe the on-air talent or the DJs in the studio doing, a live on-mic performance. But I would love to do that. That'd be awesome. It's the next best thing to touring, which doesn't look like I'll be able to do that until 2021, like all the artists in the world. Besides radio, touring, and maybe a tour, I'm debating about album number 2. I'm starting to think about album number 2. I've had some song ideas, but I was feeling, as I expressed in other interviews, there was a time where I hung up my microphone and I kind of gave up on the music industry and started pursuing other things in the entertainment industry. But the prompting from God to do this album, it is the only reason why I dusted off my equipment.
So get up, stand up and rise. Lift your hands up to the sky. So get up, stand up and rise.